Okay, continuing with our read of Breadwinner, this is chapter 2. Mother and Noria were cleaning again. Father kissed Ali and Mariam, went to the bathroom to wash the dust off his feet, face and hands, then stretched out on a toe shack for a rest. Pavana put down her bundles and started to take off her chador. We need water, Noria said. Can't I sit down for a while first? Pavana asked her mother. You'll rest better when your work is done. Now go. The water tank is almost empty. Pavana groaned. If the water tank was almost empty, she'd have to make 5 trips to the water tap. 6, because her mother hated to see an empty water bucket. If you had fetched it yesterday, when Mother asked you, you wouldn't have so much to haul today, Noria said, as Pavana passed by her to get to the water bucket. Noria smiled a superior big sister smile and flipped her hair back over her shoulders. Pavana wanted to kick her. Noria had beautiful hair, long and thick. Pavana's hair was thin and stringy. She wanted hair like her sister's, and Noria knew this. Pavana grumbled all the way down the steps, down the block to the neighbourhood tap. The trip home with a full bucket was worse, especially the 3 flights of stairs. Being angry at Noria gave her the energy to do it, so Pavana kept grumbling. Noria never goes for water, nor does Mother. Mariam doesn't either. She doesn't have to do anything. Pavana knew she was mumbling nonsense, but she kept it up anyway. Mariam was only 5, and she couldn't carry an empty bucket downstairs, let alone a full bucket upstairs. Mother and Noria had to wear burqas whenever they went outside, and they couldn't carry a pail of water up those uneven, broken stairs if they were wearing burqas. Plus, it was dangerous for women to go outside without a man. Pavana knew she had to fetch the water because there was nobody else in the family who could do it. Sometimes this made her resentful. Sometimes it made her proud. One thing she knew, it didn't matter how she felt. Good mood or bad, the water had to be fetched, and she had to fetch it. Finally, the tank was full, the water bucket was full, and Pavana could slip off her sandals, hang up her chador, and relax. She sat on the floor beside Mariam and watched her little sister draw a picture. You're very talented, Mariam. One day you will sell your drawings for tons and tons of money. We'll be very rich and live in a palace, and you will wear blue silk dresses. Green silk, Mariam said. Green silk, Pavana agreed. Instead of just sitting there, you could help us over here. Mother and Noria were cleaning out the cupboard again. You cleaned out the cupboard 3 days ago. Are you going to help us or not? Not, Pavana thought, but she got to her feet. Mother and Noria were always cleaning something. Since they couldn't work or go to school, they didn't have much else to do. The Taliban have said we must stay inside. But that doesn't mean we have to live in filth, Mother was fond of saying. Pavana hated all that cleaning. It used up the water she had to haul. The only thing worse was for Noria to wash her hair. Pavana looked around the tiny room. All of the furniture she remembered from their other houses had been destroyed by bombs or stolen by looters. All they had now was a tall wooden cupboard, which had been in the room when they rented it. It held the few belongings they had been able to save. 2 tushaks were set against the wall, and that was all the furniture they had. They used to have beautiful Afghan carpets, Pavana remembered, tracing the intricate patterns of them with her fingers when she was younger. Now there were just cheap matting all over the cement floor. Pavana could cross their main room with 10 regular steps one way and 12 regular steps the other way. It was usually her job to sweep the mat with their tiny whisk broom. She knew every inch of it. At the end of the room was the lavatory. It was a very small room with a platform toilet, not the modern Western toilet they used to have. The little propane cook stove was kept in there because a tiny vent high in the wall kept fresh air coming into the room. The water tank was there too. A metal drum that held 5 pails of water, and the wash basin was next to that. Other people lived in the part of the building that was still standing. Pavana saw them as she went to fetch water, or went out with her father to the marketplace. We must keep a safe distance, Father told her. The Taliban encouraged neighbour to spy on neighbour. It is safer to keep to ourselves. It may have been safer, Pavana often thought, but it was also lonely. Maybe there was another girl her age. right close by, but she'd never find out. Father had his books. Mariam played with Ali. Noria had Mother, but Pavana didn't have anybody. Mother and Noria had wiped down the cupboard shelves. Now they were putting things back. Here is a pile of things for your father to sell in the market. Put them by the door, Mother directed her. The vibrant red cloth caught Pavana's eye. My good shalwar kameez, we can't sell that. I decide what we're going to sell, not you. There's no longer any use for it, unless you're planning to go to parties you haven't bothered to tell me about. Pavana knew there was no point arguing. Ever since she had been forced out of a job, Mother's temper grew shorter every day. Pavana put the outfit with the other items by the door. She ran her fingers over the intricate embroidery. It had been an Eid present from her aunt in Mazar-e-Sharif, a city in the north of Afghanistan. She hoped her aunt would be angry at her mother for selling it. Why don't we sell Noria's good clothes? She's not going anywhere. She'll need them when she gets married. Noria made a superior sort of face at Pavana. As an extra insult, she tossed her head to make her long hair swing. I pity whoever marries you, Pavana said. He'll be getting a stuck-up snob for a wife. That's enough, Mother said. Pavana fumed. Mother always took Noria's side. Pavana hated Noria, and she'd hate her mother too, if she wasn't her mother. Her anger melted when she saw her mother pick up the parcel of Hussein's clothes and put it away on the top shelf of the cupboard. Her mother always looked sad when she touched Hussein's clothes. Noria hadn't been the oldest. Hussein had been the oldest child. He had been killed by a landmine when he was just 14 years old. Mother and father never talked about him. To remember him was too painful. Noria had told Pavana about him during one of the rare times they were talking to each other. Hussein had laughed a lot and was always trying to get Noria to play games with him, even though she was a girl. Don't be such a princess, he'd say. A little football will do you good. Sometimes, Noria said, she'd give in and play, and Hussein would always kick the ball to her in a way that she could stop it and kick it back. He used to pick you up and play with you a lot too, Noria told Pavana. He actually seemed to like you. Imagine that! From Noria's stories, Hussein sounded like someone Pavana would have liked too. Seeing the pain in her mother's face, Pavana put her anger away and quietly helped get supper ready. The family ate Afghan style, sitting around a plastic cloth spread out on the floor. Food cheered everyone up, and the family lingered after the meal was over. At some point, Pavana knew a secret signal would pass between her mother and Noria, and the two of them would rise at the same instant to begin clearing up. Pavana had no idea how they did it. She would watch for a sign to go between the two of them, but she could never see one. Ali was dozing on Mother's lap, a piece of naan in his little fist. Every now and then he would realize he was falling asleep and would rouse himself, as if he hated the thought of missing out on something. He tried to get up, but Mother held him quite firmly. After wriggling for a moment, he'd give up and doze off again. Father, looking restful after his nap, had changed into his good white shalwar kameez. His long beard was neatly combed. Pavana thought he looked very handsome. When the Taliban first came and ordered all men to grow beards, Pavana had a hard time getting used to her father's face. He'd never worn a beard before. Father had a hard time getting used to it too. It itched a lot at first. Now he was telling stories from history. He had been a history teacher before his school was bombed. Pavana had grown up with the stories, which made her a very good student in history class. It was 1880, and the British were trying to take over our country. Did we want the British to take over? He asked Mariam. No, Mariam answered. We certainly did not. Everybody comes to Afghanistan to try to take it over, but we Afghans kick them all out. We are the most welcoming, hospitable people on earth. A guest to us is king. You guys remember that. When a guest comes to your house, he must have the very best of everything. Or she, Pavana said. Father grinned at her. Or she. We Afghans do everything we can to make our guests comfortable, but if someone comes into our home or our country and acts like our enemy, then we will defend our home." "Father, get on with the story," Pavana urged. She had heard it before, many times, but she wanted to hear it again. Father grinned again. "We must teach this child some patience," he said to Mother. Pavana didn't need to look at her mother to know she was probably thinking they needed to teach her a whole lot more than that. "All right," he relented. On with the story. It was 1880. In the dust around the city of Kandahar, the Afghans were fighting the British. It was a terrible battle. Many were dead, the British were winning, and the Afghans were ready to give up. Their spirits were low. They had no strength to keep fighting. Surrender and capture were starting to look good to them. At least they could rest and maybe save their lives. Suddenly, a tiny girl, younger than Noria, burst from one of the village houses. She ran to the front of the battle and turned to face the Afghan troops. She ripped the veil off her head, and with the hot sun streaming down her face and her bare head, she called to the troops. "We can win this battle," she cried. "Don't give up hope. Pick yourselves up. Let's go." Waving a veil in the air like a battle flag, she led the troops into a final rush at the British. The British had no chance. The Afghans won the battle. The lesson here, my daughters, he looked from one to the other, is that Afghanistan will always be the home of the bravest women in the world. You're all brave women. You're all inheritors of the courage of Malali. "We can win this battle!" Mariam cried out, waving her arm around as if she was holding a flag. Mother moved the teapot out of harm's way. "How can we be brave?" Noria asked. "We can't even go outside. How can we lead men into battle? I've seen enough war. I don't want to see any more." "There are many types of battle," Father said quietly, "including the battle with the supper dishes," Mother said. Pavana made such a face that Father started to laugh. Mariam tried to imitate it, which made Mother and Noria laugh. Ali woke up, saw everybody laughing, and he started to laugh too. The whole family was laughing when 4 Taliban soldiers burst through the door. Ali was the first to react. The slam of the door against the wall shocked him, and he screamed. Mother leapt to her feet, and in an instant Ali and Mariam were in the corner of the room, shrieking behind her legs. Noria covered herself completely with a chador and scrunched herself into a small ball. Young women were sometimes stolen by soldiers. They were snatched from their homes, and their families never saw them again. Pavana couldn't move. She sat as if frozen at the edge of the supper cloth. The soldiers were giants, their piled high turbans making them look even taller. 2 of the soldiers grabbed her father. The other 2 began searching the apartment, kicking the remains of dinner all over the mat. "Leave him alone," Mother screamed. "He has done nothing wrong." "Why did you go to England for your education?" the soldiers yelled at Father. "Afghanistan doesn't need your foreign ideas." They yanked him towards the door. "Afghanistan needs more illiterate thugs like you," Father said. One of the soldiers hit him in the face. Blood from his nose dripped onto his white shalwar kameez. Mother sprang at the soldiers, pounding them with her fists. She grabbed Father's arm and tried to pull it out of their grasp. One of the soldiers raised his rifle and whacked her on the head. She collapsed on the floor. The soldier hit her a few more times. Mariam and Ali screamed with every blow to their mother's back. Seeing her mother on the ground finally propelled Pavana into action. When the soldiers dragged her father outside, she flung her arms around his waist. As the soldiers pried her loose, she heard her father say, "Take care of the others, my Malali," and then he was gone. Pavana watched helplessly as 2 soldiers dragged him down the steps, his beautiful shalwar kameez ripping on the rough cement. Then they turned a corner, and she could see them no more. Inside the room, the other 2 soldiers were ripping open the toshaks with knives and tossing things out of the cupboard. Father's books! At the bottom of the cupboard was a secret compartment her father had built to hide the few books that he had not destroyed in one of the bombings. Some were English books about history and literature. They were kept hidden because the Taliban burned books they didn't like. They couldn't be allowed to find Father's books. The soldiers started at the top of the cupboard and were working their way down. Clothes, blankets, pots, everything landed on the floor. Closer and closer they came to the bottom shelf, the one with the false wall. Pavana watched in horror as the soldiers bent to yank the things out of the bottom shelf. "Get out of my house!" she yelled. She threw herself at the soldiers with such force that they both fell to the ground. She swung at them with her fists until she was knocked aside. She heard rather than felt the thwack of the sticks on her back. She kept her head hidden in her arms until the beating stopped and the soldiers went away. Mother got off the floor and had her hands full with Ali. Noria was still curled up in a terrified ball. It was Mariam who came over to help Pavana. At the first touch of her sister's hands, Pavana flinched, thinking it was the soldiers. Mariam kept stroking her hair until Pavana realized who it was. She sat up, aching all over. She and Mariam clung to each other, trembling. She had no idea how long the family stayed like that. They remained in their spots long after Ali stopped screaming and collapsed into sleep.